My name is Kyle, and we're here to present our report diving deep into CII water usage, a benchmarking, water efficiency, and market analysis study in Irvine Ranch Water District. There's our team. And then, so our roadmaps. So we're going to talk about our introduction, then get into some background about the water use in the CII sector.
This is Henri.
Oh, sorry.
I'm Henri.
I'm Shivani.
I'm Enrique.
I'm Allie.
I'm Marilynn.
We're the team. So we're going to get into our intro, background into IRWD and water use in the CII sector, our data and our data sets, qualitative analysis, quantitative analysis, our regressions we ran, income, rebates, the budget rates, Yelp rating, and the school effect of water use, our limitations with our data sets, and our recommendations based on our regressions. So our introduction. The southern coast has the highest water usage and most potentials for savings. Despite all the efforts to reduce water, there is still significantly more room for opportunity for growth. As you can see in the southern coast, the southern region has the highest water use per capita and the total urban water use as well. IRWD serves a very large population. They have about 500,000 daytime population served and 380,000 residential customers. Their cities range within Irvine, Tuscan, Lake Forest, Newport Beach, and Costa Mesa. IRWD's composition is extremely diverse. They have drinking wells, urban runoff treatment sites, reservoirs, recycled water treatment plants, service connections, recycled water pipelines, drinking water pipelines, sewage collection pipelines. Their portfolio also includes clear groundwater, recycled water, imported water, treated groundwater, and local surface water. And the rates are based on individual customer and property needs, landscaped areas, and weather conditions. IRWD CII sector has a significant customer reach. As you can see, about 58% is residential, and about 31% is CII, which is the commercial industrial industries. And even though residential is the largest population in terms of their customer breakdown, it's also the most studied. And this is why we wanted to dive deep into the CII sector, because it's understudied. So from 2011 to 2015, there was a severe drought, which led to increased focus on water use in various sectors. The drought impacted water use of homes, businesses, and other operations. So this just gives us a timeline of kind of the big events during that timeline from 2008 to 2017 to give us a scope of the region we're studying with our data, which was from 2010 to 2017. So our project objective. Our focus is to assess how CII water use has been evolving over time and to what extent IRWD's demand management strategies have been affecting water use in the CII sector. Some of our research questions are as follows. How do IRWD CII businesses use water by industry? How do demographics affect their yearly water use? Are monthly rebate programs an effective method of making water usage more efficient? Is a 4-tiered budget rate system more effective than a 2-tiered system? Is the IRWD budget rate program an effective method for making water usage more efficient than a fixed rate system? How do Yelp ratings and Yelp pricing predict water usage within specific industries? What is the water usage per student across comparable schools? Are newer schools more efficient than older ones? And how do demographics affect school water use? So these are our main questions when we went into our data. The CII water use is understudied due to a heterogeneous client base. Laundromats, restaurants compared to electronic stores. Obviously the water use varies between those industries, which is the cause for the little studies within the region. Past studies include CII water clients grouped by industry according to NAICS, which is the Northern American Industry Classification System, and that's how we pretty much grouped the different clients into different industries, which we'll see in our regressions with some of our results. Methods of analysis for past studies include OLS, ordinary least squares regression, and data envelopes. Data envelopment. We overcame this hurdle by analyzing specific industries and comparing industries by spatial ID, or SPID, which is how we match most of our data to run our regressions.
So the first thing we wanted to do is really understand IRWD's district, which is composed of 76 villages. So what we initially thought was that IRWD villages and their demographics could affect water use. Here we have a map of IRWD's 76 villages. So what we did was we matched village water or water use in 2017 by CCF, which is hundreds of cubic feet per village. Here we can see a large range of IRWD village CII water use that could be explained by village demographic diversity. We have villages such as IIC East, IIC West, and Woodbridge that have very large CII water use in 2017 compared to villages like Laurelwood, Peppertree, and Woodbury East that have significantly less water use in the same year. So what we did was we believe that people are often geographically grouped by their demographic characteristics. Therefore, we believe that these factors could affect CII water use per village. So what we decided to do is we decided to look at 7 demographic variables. The demographic variables that we looked at are population density, income, race, and unemployment. And in order to gather our data, we used census tract data from Simply Analytics, and the team utilized GIS, or Geographic Information System, to model our demographic variables. In the next couple slides, I'm going to go through some of these variables to show their effect on the villages. So the first one I'm going to look at is IRW population density. And IRWD has a large range of population density within the villages. We see the villages of Newport Coast, Santa Ana Heights have very high population densities compared to the villages in the center of the district that have much lower population densities that range from 16 people to about 2,000 people per square mile. The second variable that I'm going to talk about is median household income. IRWD's median household income is 3 times the national average. This is a very wealthy population with many villages ranging from 147,000 to about 196,000 of US dollars per year. We can see that the villages of Newport Coast, Crystal Cove, and the Newport Beach area have very high median household incomes compared to the villages right here in the southeast region of the district. The next variable I'm going to look at is Hispanic population percentage. IRWD's Hispanic population percentage is very variable. It has a range of 3 to 95% per village. We see that the villages of Newport Coast, Crystal Cove have a very low range, while the villages of Tustin Legacy, ISC West have a much higher percentage of Hispanic population. The last variable we're going to talk about is unemployment. IRWD has consistent low unemployment with all of the villages below the national level of 4%. We can see that the central area of the map has the lowest unemployment out of the entire district.
Okay, so next I'm going to be talking about the industry composition of the CII sector to give you guys a better sense of what their sector looks like. Okay, so here we have a graph of the industry composition sector. So 5 industries to note are the ones that are bracketed here. So manufacturing, retail trade, real estate rental and leasing, professional scientific and technical services, and organizations. So we can see that industry 11, again, real estate rental and leasing, is the biggest industry in the CII sector at just under 20%. It's important to note too that industries 1, 2, 3, and 14, you can see the legend here, have been omitted from this graph because their percentages are so small. But again, as we can see, a lot of different industries make up the CII sector and they vary in percentages. So here we have a graph looking at the industry composition of the CII sector over time and seeing how these industry compositions changed. Again, we're looking at 2010 to 2017. We can see in general for industries 1 through 13 that the industry composition is relatively stable across time. The only industry that really showed a change was real estate, rental, and leasing, which had a slight decrease from 2010 to 2017. And then so again, this is the same graph, but for industries 14 through 25, we can see again the industry composition is relatively stable. The only 3 industries that really showed a little bit of change over time were accommodation, food services, and organizations. So next I want to discuss the normalized water usage for IRWD. So the length of the billing dates requires normalization. This is because the length of the billing dates are inconsistent across businesses and industries. So in terms of the billing dates, there are 4 possible scenarios that might explain why these bills overlapped. There can be a single reading per month. There can be multiple readings per month where the bill being looked at is the first reading. There can be multiple readings per month where the bill being looked at is the last reading. And then there can be multiple readings per month and the bill being looked at is not the first nor the last reading. So here we have a graph looking at the mean normalized water usage by month for all CII clients. And again, this is an average per month across 2010 and 2017, so all those years included based on our study. We can see that there is generally a higher water usage in these warmer months, but there isn't a lot of seasonality present. And because of this, we thought it was not necessary to detrend our data. So next we have a graph looking at the monthly normalized water usage of CII clients by industry. So 3 industries I want to draw your attention to. First we have agriculture, forestry, and fishing right here. So you can see they have a relatively high median and a fairly high range. Another industry I want to draw your attention to is arts, entertainment, and recreation. So industry 18 right there. They have a fairly low median but a very high range. We believe this is due to the number of businesses in the industry and the variances within those businesses. And then finally, personal and household goods, repair and maintenance, industry 22 right there, a very low median and a very low range. So we can see again across all these industries, there's a lot of variance in both medians and ranges. So this graph and then the 2 graphs to follow are going to look at the mean normalized monthly water usage by industry. And one particular year I want to draw your attention to is 2014. In all of these industries, with the exception of industry number 5, which is on the next graph, we can see a sharp decrease in water usage. We believe this is due to Governor Brown declaring a California state of emergency and businesses likely feeling incentivized to reduce their water usage. So then this is again looking at industries 1 through 13. And then industry 5, manufacturing, we had to put on its own graph because its monthly normalized water usage was so much higher than the other industries. But again, we still see this decline in 2014. And then if you go to the next graph, so again, same graph, but looking at industries 14 through 25. It's interesting to note that accommodation was the only industry with a sharp spike. Although we initially believed this was due to the economy, we now conclude that this is likely an error within our data. This is also the only outlier in these industries, so again, that gives us reason to believe that this is an error within our data.
So next we'll be talking about Yelp data and ratings. So we use our Yelp data in 2 ways. One of these 2 ways was to complement our matching with NICS codes. So for every customer that IRWD had who didn't have a NICS code, we matched it with the Yelp data to see what industry they had. But we also wanted to see how Yelp ratings and Yelp pricing ranges affected water use. We believe there was some association. So as we can see, Yelp has a rating system from 1 to 5, and the price ranges are in tiers of 4. First, the lowest tier being 0 to 10, and the highest tier being 61 or higher. Next, we wanted to see how industries, like the average rating for industries, and as surprisingly enough, we see that organizations in public administration have the highest Yelp ratings, while the lowest ratings are retail, trade, and personal and household goods, repairs, and maintenance. We also wanted to see how sort of price ranges interacted with ratings. So we see that the 3rd highest price range, the 31 to 60 range, is the one with the highest Yelp rating, while the lowest one is the one with the highest price. We presume that this is most likely because the higher the rating, the higher the standard charge, the stricter the people will rate them.
Next, I'll provide an overview of rebate participation in IRWD. Rebate programs are central to IRWD's drought management strategy. We believe, based on our background data, that rebate participants had lower water usage as a result. A limitation is that since rebate participants are self-selecting, they're not representative of the entire CII population. Looking at the different types of rebate participation measures available, the most popular were high-efficiency clothes washers, high-efficiency toilets, and zero-water urinals, accounting for about 56% of rebate participation. When it comes to rebate participation by city, Irvine had a total of 68% of participants, and the rest of the cities had similar low levels of participation.
So next we're going to talk about something that we thought might have an effect on the CII water use, which was the budget rates. So budget rates are a way for IRWD to potentially guide their CII clients to make better decisions when in terms of water use. So we wanted to analyze the budget rates in 2 parts. So the first is we wanted to analyze how the budget rate pay structure has impacted water use among CIIs. So in 2014, IRWD made a switch from a 4-tier system to a 2-tiered system, and so we believe that this change could affect the way CII uses their water. And then the second part is that we wanted to analyze a community that came on late to the budget rate system. So previously they were on a fixed rate system. And this community was Lake Forest. So in 2011, they made the switch to a budget rate system, which we thought could affect their CII water use, industry water use.
So now I'm going to talk about our qualitative analysis. We model all of our regressions to avoid collinearity utilizing VIF. Which is the variable inflation factor, which measures how much the variance of a coefficient is affected by multicollinearity. VIF above 2 shows multicollinearity, and the greater multicollinearity, the greater the standard errors we can have within our data. To avoid this, we remove both Asian and population variables to avoid multicollinearity, since both were highly correlated. This enabled our regressions results to be more statistically significant.
So I'm going to walk us through an overview of the regression analysis that we ran, our quantitative analysis. So our quantitative analysis was conducted utilizing STATA. Our methods of analysis were ordinary least squares, OLS, and then difference and differences. So we ran 5 main regressions on the industry level. And so our first regression was the effect of income, unemployment, village age, and race on yearly water use, just as a baseline to understand how demographics interact with water use. Our second regression was the effect of rebates on monthly industry water use. Our third was the effect of the 2-part system that I was talking about earlier, the tier system budget rate change on yearly water use, and then the budget rate switch for Lake Forest yearly water use. Our fourth regression was the effect of Yelp ratings and Yelp pricing on yearly water use. And our last was our case study where we looked at the effect of average building age, school enrollment, population density, and income on yearly water use. Water use was measured in CCF as defined earlier by Henri. So something to note in the results that you'll see later is that we only kept ones that had an R-squared value above 0.3, so that was our threshold. The R-squared value is a way for us to define whether or not our regression model really fits these industries. We also ran the regression on a general level, found very little significance, and so we decided to run industry-level regressions. And we only kept the results that were industries present in at least 4 villages, because we felt that that was the threshold needed to kind of be able to generalize the effects of those different things I mentioned in the regressions. So I'm going to take us into the first regression, which was our Socio-Economic Analysis, and our baseline to see how demographics ultimately interact with water use. So we found some varying results. We found that minority groups, so Hispanic and Black, which we are using as proxies for Asian as well, have varying results depending on the industry, and we think this is due to the differences in how different minority groups interact with various industries. One thing we saw on every single regression we ran is that the village average age, which is the average age of buildings in a village, as they get older, there's increased water use, which makes sense because as a building gets older, it has less efficient products such as pipes or toilets or things like that. And so that finding made a lot of sense with previous studies and literature on the subject. The next thing we found is that in vehicle and equipment rental and leasing, that unemployment as it increased, water use decreases, which also made sense with past literature, because as unemployment decreases, employees will decrease, leading to less water use. The one interesting finding that we can't really explain is income. So we found that as income increases in this industry, water usage decreases. We're not really sure what is the causing factor behind this, and it is contrary to popular literature.
So now I'm going to talk about our rebate regression. For this regression, we want to see the effect of rebates on normalized water, obviously using our controls. And we found within our data that at the different confidence levels, our results were not statistically significant, even though literature does show that rebate programs have a great effect on water use. For personal services, public administration, accommodation, and food services, none of our results, at least for the rebate programs, were not statistically significant. And the reason for this was, as we mentioned earlier when we went over the rebate distribution and participation, only 22 SPIDs were matched to actually participate in rebate programs out of the 6,000 that we had in our data set. So one of our biggest beliefs is that because of a small sample size, a lot of our results weren't significant.
For the budget rate analysis, we looked at it in 2 parts. The first part being IRWD switch from a 4-tiered budget rate system to a 2-tiered budget rate system and its effect on water usage. And the second part being Lakewood's switch from a fixed rate system to a budget rate system. In the first part, we used OLS regression. We found overall that usually the switch did not have a statistically significant impact on water usage, except for the case of public administration. We believe this is true because public administration is more closely connected to IRWD as its nature as a public administration entity. For the effect of the budget rate switch on lake forest, we found that overall, again, we did not find much statistically significant changes, except for in the case of vehicle and equipment rental and leasing, which we found was an increase in water usage. After the switch, we believe that this switch happened because this industry is not sensitive to price, and they might have experienced an increased demand in their services or products during this time as well.
So next we'll talk about our Yelp analysis. So as you can see here, we want to see the relationship between Yelp ratings and Yelp pricings. Interestingly enough, what we saw is that for every result that was statistically significant for Yelp, the relationship between water use and Yelp was inverse. So as Yelp ratings went up for a business, we saw that the associated water use for that establishment went down. And that happened for all industries except for finance. Which as Yelp ratings went up, also water use went up, and we related this to the fact that probably an institution with finance and insurance probably is bigger with Yelp ratings, so we probably rate Goldman Sachs better than we'd rate just a regular bank. And that's what we use the water use. For pricing, we saw the relationship was inverted, so for some industries, as establishments went up the price bracket, water use went down, while others, as pricing went up, water use went up, and there was also instances where there were dips in between price ranges. So we deduced that the relationship here was probably just absorbing some of their unobservable trade in our data. Yeah.
So what we wanted to do is really get in a deep dive into one industry, and the industry we chose are schools. And the reason why we chose schools is that schools have high water use and are a large client for water efficient policies. So schools in IRWD are not maximizing their water. So what we did in our analysis is we looked at the 57 schools in IRWD that included both private and public institutions. But what we decided to do was really zoom in on these 4 public school districts. The 4 public school districts are the Irvine, Newport Mesa, Saddleback Valley, and Tustin Unified School Districts. We gathered this data from California Ed Data, and we also used Simply Analytics demographic data per school district to really analyze the demographics within the school district. So what we see is that IRWD has a wide range of water use per school district. We can see here in the blue that Irvine Unified School District has the highest total water use per school district, and that makes sense because they have also the highest enrollment by school district. Another interesting district is the Newport Mesa Unified School District. The Newport Mesa Unified School District has the lowest total water use. They also have the lowest enrollment, but they have the highest water use per student by school district. If we go in, what we also decided to do was analyze water use by school type. So we looked at 3 different school types: high schools, middle schools, and elementary schools. We can see that high schools used the most water by all these types, and this makes sense because high schools are typically larger, they have more facilities, they have more after-school facilities that require more water compared to middle schools and elementary schools. The second most school type that had most water use is elementary schools. Elementary schools actually have the largest enrollment by school type in IRWD, but they had the lowest water use per student by school type.
So as we wanted to also analyze how schools interacted with all these different variables, and we did something slightly different than the other ones. So as you can see, what we did, we looked at demographic variables by zip codes, not by villages, since we assume that a school district probably serves a much more variant population. So we did the same thing with the EIF. We took away all the variables that had a lot of collinearity. In this case, it was all the race variables, so the demographic variables that we had was population, density, and income, which we assume absorb all the other impacts of the demographic variables we wanted to include. Interestingly enough, what we see is that average building age, school enrollment, and income are the variables that are most significant at this point. School enrollment makes sense, so the larger the school, the more water use, so there's no issue there. Income was interesting because that is a per dollar use, per $1,000 use. So for every $1,000, we see that there's an associated increase with that. Interestingly enough, average building age, so the older schools got, apparently there was a decrease in water use. Once we did a slightly further analysis, we saw it was simply because these older meters were associated with smaller schools.
Okay, so based on our regressions that we just discussed, we wanted to acknowledge 4 limitations. So the first limitation is because we based our models of analysis off of various leading papers within the field, where research has been limited. Again, this is because emphasis has been placed on residential water use as opposed to CII sector water use. Models are still being improved with the CII sector, so that made it a little tricky for us to kind of fully evaluate CII water use. We also do not have many industry-specific characteristics, such as employee count, square footage. We only had village age, which again, as we alluded to, is deduced by SPID install dates, associated with the industries in a village, which gave us insight on how characteristics are tied to industries and how that affects water usage. Also, as we alluded to, we had a very small sample size for our rebate regressions, which we believe significantly limited our analysis of unique variables within our different models. And then our last limitation that we wanted to recognize was we had issues with omitted variables being correlated with our independent and dependent variables, which is also known as omitted variable bias.
So based on these limitations and also the findings we had in our regressions, we came up with 6 recommendations for IRWD. Our first recommendation for them was to increase their water conservation programs for older villages. So the way we thought to do that was target marketing and outreach to these older villages, as we talked about previously, contact business owners, foster a relationship, and ultimately educate their CII clients on water conservation benefits within these villages. The second recommendation we had was proactive rebate program and advertising to educate their clients on water efficiency benefits. So based on our limitations that Ali was talking about, we advised them to conduct a longitudinal case study on a current participant and showcase that story to convince other people in their CII client base to interact with these rebate programs. We also advise to target industries where there are other consumers already participating with rebates, and then track this rebate participation and continue studies on those effects. Our third recommendation was to conduct further analysis into the budget rate system. So as we mentioned earlier, budget rates are a good way to guide CII clients' water use, but since we found little effect on overall water use, we advised to revisit their current budget allocation process and analyze with more observations how budget rates can affect water use. So for our last 3 recommendations, we are really excited about the Yelp one. So we said to advertise that Yelp ratings are correlated with lower water use. And so we would ask them to use this correlation to kind of incentivize, use this correlation to show that higher water efficiency, higher Yelp ratings are associated with better water efficiency. And so something they have is called a Water Star program. So it's for their businesses that are really good at being water efficient. And so we recommended that they work with those companies that have higher Yelp ratings within their database to become Water Star participants, and then work with Yelp to kind of create a badge within Yelp for those Water Star members. Our 5th recommendation was to replace all school meters with smart meters. Smart meters are a way to understand more daily basis and more consistently how schools are using their water. So it's kind of pricey. It's about $312 to install per meter. And so the youngest building is 19 years old, and smart meters would help understand how older buildings could utilize water more efficiency. And our last one, which is kind of our biggest one and an umbrella recommendation, was collecting more intensive data on industry-specific characteristics with CII clients. So this caused limitations with our analysis since many CII client characteristics were missing within the data as their characteristics that past studies have used to get more specific recommendations. So we suggested designing surveys for their CII clients to collect this data. And that's our presentation. Thank you.
I'll start. First, great job. A huge amount of data and information there. So first I want to start with a couple of questions so that I understand what exactly you did. So what was, you did lots of regressions, but it wasn't clear whether your observation was at an industry level or a firm level. What data did you have and over what period of time were these regressions run?
Yes, so the period was 2010 to 2017. So we had specific meters, which there could be multiple industry or clients with, but we grouped it by industry. So Marilyn can talk more about how the NICS codes are like broken up, but we use the NICS codes to create the industries that you saw our regressions on. If you want to tell them how NICS codes work.
Each client, so we had information about each client and each spatial ID, and what we did using the NICS code is just like create principal categories, because like a lot of them are very specific, and there have been like hundreds or like 200 different categories. So like I made them into like 25 different categories, and then grouped them that way. Within those categories, we tried to like match so that they had similar water use. But even within these industries themselves, a lot varies, especially on size, and we didn't have information about size. So that's the best we could have done with the information available.
So the analysis was done at the client level?
No, into like grouping, so at the 25 industry level.
So like restaurant, I'm trying to understand. So imagine restaurants as one industry.
Right, so that would be food service.
That would be food service,
Yes.
yeah.
Restaurants and,
So but you have, is that one observation per year, or is that
no,
300
so it's
restaurants
monthly
per year?
observations. There are monthly observations for each
Yeah.
client, which we then aggregate it by
like
year.
each Taco Bell has a different restaurant than the 4-star French restaurant, each one is a separate?
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's on a restaurant basis?
Yes.
Okay,
And we grouped them.
They have basically every individual meter.
Okay,
that they
yeah.
have.
Yes.
They have those actually.
Yeah.
And then did you look at each Yelp review related to that?
No, so we looked at the average Yelp rating
No, but
for
you
each
did.
industry.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
each.
For each,
Yeah.
for each.
For
So,
each client.
yeah, so for that Yelp
We matched.
regression, what we did is we actually only used the industries and the clients that actually had Yelp data, right? Because some establishments just don't have it, so that was actually a smaller subsector of our data.
So did you run a different regression for each industry, or you had?
Yes.
Yes.
For the 25
It was
industries.
25 different.
But for each, it was at the client level.
No, so we aggregated it, because there were too many observations, so we tried that and weren't getting really significant results. It was 500,000 observations. And so what we did is we aggregated them by year, by village, by industry, and then ran regressions on that. So we had about 3,000 for the first 3 regressions, so the rebate, the budget, and the socioeconomic. We had 3,000 rows of data. And then for the Yelp, we had about 1,000 clients or 1,200 clients that matched out of the 6,000. So that was on a specific spatial ID level. And then for the schools, it was a completely different regression and data set.
Schools are individual meters,
Yeah.
Yeah.
so that's the only one, so they're different scales.
So for the industry ones, you ran a regression for each industry,
Yes.
and for each of those, each observation was,
Yearly water
Yearly
use
water
by
use.
village.
so it's a village year level analysis.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Year, village year industry.
Because that's what I've got, because I noticed, they went by quickly, like 325 observations was one of them.
Right,
Right,
so
yes.
the one that was monthly was rebates, because the way we did that is we looked at when an individual customer started the rebate and when he didn't, so that was a subsection. So that was monthly water